So for more on China's tax reform, let's bring in Arthur Dong now. He is the professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk winners and losers here. First of all, winners. Who benefits from this new tax law?
Well, certainly with the new tax law and the tax reform, an immediate tax reduction that is planned, that is both on the corporate side as well as the individual side. So the intended purpose of this is to stimulate the Chinese economy. So from a consumer's point of view or a regular citizen's point of view, they'll have greater disposable income at work, enabling them, in a sense, to go to the mall a few more times,
go out to
dinner and spend more money to sort of revitalize as well as inject some stimulation into their economy. The corporate side has been talking about this for a long time. Chinese corporates, both the state-owned sector as well as the private sector, have been complaining about the sort of onerous social welfare payments as well as the tax system in China. And they were urging the central policy administrators to try to take a look at this and sort of normalize this so it would be more in line with what other countries were paying.
So individual income tax was the third biggest contributor, I believe, to China's total tax revenue. Does Beijing now have to look for other sources of revenue as a result of this tax cut?
Yeah, absolutely. There are going to be other things on the table because when you think about sort of the fiscal, the opportunities fiscally for the government to generate revenues for their treasury, be it at the national level or at the city and more like local level, they're probably going to be looking at either an increase in sales tax to make up for this this change, as well as perhaps the imposition of property taxes more in line with what you see in the West.
What kind of percentages could we be looking at?
Those percentages, I'm not sure I have a handle on what those percentages are, but I think they'll be looking at them certainly at a higher level than what they presently exist.
And you talk about the efforts to stimulate the economy, and that begs the question, will it work? Will people feel like they can spend this money, or will they save it?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because part of the reason why the most latest figures that we're starting to see coming out of certain indices in China is that the Chinese consumer is starting to sort of constrain themselves. They're worried about the future. They certainly have worried about the trade war and the impact of the trade war on the domestic economy, as well as their future jobs and livelihoods. So there has been sort of a constraining effect as a result of all this uncertainty induced by global trade wars. And so whether or not this tax initiative will be enough to get Chinese consumers to spend more, that's a very, very interesting question. But I think from a policymaker's point of view, at least they're thinking that this will have some kind of immediate impact.
When do you think we could see an impact so we can test the theory?
Well, if they record these numbers on a quarterly basis, probably at the release of the next quarter.
Okay, so pretty soon.
Yeah,
relatively.
I mean, store operators, mall operators, they're going to notice whether or not right away that their cash registers are ringing up more sales.
I think it bears sort of highlighting, too, that Chinese folks have additional family responsibilities. So when they're planning their finances, they're planning for two sets of parents that they have to take care of as well. So when we talk about a slowing economy, there's a lot more responsibility on each individual financially than you might think.
Yeah, oftentimes the family unit is an extended family unit in China, and this is nothing new. This goes back for millennia. Sure. And as a result of the aging of the population in China, so they are facing this sort of demographic headwind, right, where their parents are getting older or approaching retirement age, meaning that those that are in the working population at their working years have a greater responsibility not only to their own children, but certainly their mom and dad as well.
So that's got to be a factor as well. I want to just ask you quickly about foreign firms. There is a income tax exemption on reinvested profits, I believe, for foreign firms. What's the goal there?
Well, the goal is to keep the profits within China so those profits aren't repatriated back to the United States. We know that under President Trump, greater sort of initiatives and rewards have been promoted to have companies repatriate their profits. So this is just another way for China to send a signal to foreign-owned companies that reside in China and operating in China. We're going to encourage you and provide financial and economic incentives for you to keep some of those funds here and continue to invest in your factories and your operations in China.
All right, Arthur Dong from Georgetown. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.